my introduction to LitRPG was an email from Podium Audio saying, "Will you narrate this LitRPG?" I had not encountered it before. There was said it's this book series, and it's probably going to be 3 books, is what they actually said at the time. I know that because I recently was reading that email because I had to, and I was looking at that, and I was like, there were like 3 books, maybe.
And which one was that?
That was He Who Fights with Monsters.
Oh, yeah, of course. That short little series.
Yeah.
Of novellas.
The little one, yeah. So that was my first introduction to LitRPG, at which point I had to Google what is LitRPG. But the thing is, as soon as I started reading it, both monsters and other things, it felt immediately familiar.
Yeah. This is the Crit RPG podcast, your one-stop shop for everything LitRPG, progression fantasy, and Royal Road. All right. Hi, and welcome to the Crit RPG podcast, the only podcast where we invite people with good microphones so they can talk to me about Crystal Wash. With me today is Heath Miller. You might know him as, among many other series we're going to talk about, the narrator of He Who Fights with Monsters. Heath, how are you doing?
I am very well. Thanks for having me.
Gladly. Yeah.
And I'll try not to be distracted by trying to make out the spines on all of the books in your background.
They're like, these one you might know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and Harrow. I saw Harrow immediately. It's a distinctive cover.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And all of that stuff is Agile Coaching.
Is what coaching?
Agile Coaching. So
Agile as in like quick? Is that a thing I'm supposed to know what that is?
Oh, okay. So my favorite part of the podcast. I can derail the podcast at the beginning. Awesome.
Before we've even begun.
Before the first question, I can talk about my job. Awesome.
Excellent.
It's a little bit of a spin on life coaching. I go into organizations. They hire me in order to tell them why they're bad. And basically, it's a bit of consultant, it's a bit of life coaching, and I usually am hired to investigate teams and investigate dysfunctions there. I do this for 2 years, 3 years more, even more, and I kind of work with them to kind of generate some sort of entrepreneurial mindset so that they can then work faster and with less oversight.
Sure. Hence the agility.
Exactly.
And is that like a proprietary term, or is that like an industry term?
It's an industry term. It's not copyrighted or anything.
There you go. So, I learned something today, and that's the important thing.
Yeah. So to make if I do my job well, everyone wins, which is why I like it.
Yeah, that's great.
But that's all that kind of stuff. Lots of like business books and stuff about asking about emotions and
love it.
That kind of stuff. Yeah. You're drinking Prosecco at 8 a.m.
And espresso. So
Prosecco and espresso.
Yeah, I mean, not mixed together in a trough because that would be an offense against the beverage gods. But independently.
That's awesome.
Of one another. I've read some business books, not many, but a few. I did one about like the Incas and lessons to be learned about business from the Incas.
Okay.
Frankly, I'm pretty sure that the quite wealthy CEOs went on a trip to Peru and wanted to write it off for tax purposes. And so they just thought, we'll write a book about business and then we'll somehow relate this tangentially to Incas. I genuinely think that's what, no disrespect intended to the author, you get that tax deduction. But yeah, so it was like reviewed in a couple of industry magazines, like both audiobook and business ones. I've done some other business ones too, but for some reason that stands out. I think because of the ancient civilization connection.
What was the main takeaway?
I don't remember. I read it into a microphone, so I don't have to remember.
Oh,
because you can get that on Audible. You can X credit if you're looking for something. I don't remember the exact title, but it definitely involves business and Incas. So no, the takeaway. they mostly told stories from their kind of business life, and then try to relate that back to what they had learnt about the ancient Inca civilization.
Crit RPG podcast, everyone, where we talk about agility.
We talk about agility,
and the Incas.
Business books, the Incas, beverages.
Beverages, yes, exactly. And the beverage gods in general. Awesome. Okay.
I'll let you actually start now. You can ask a question.
Thank you. No, actually, we can keep talking about this other kind of stuff. People are used to it by now. Probably someone's going to be in the comments again going, well, they're talking about everything but the books. But, I mean, you can read the books.
Exactly.
But we already touched upon this question. Who are you? Why? And if yes, how many?
Yes. So I'm Heath Miller. I'm a voice actor, and as you mentioned, do read a fair amount of LitRPG as well as He Who Fights with Monsters. I've got the Edge Force series, which is another Australian one, kind of a horror, sort of a Resident Evil-y kind of feeling one. There's the Dead Man series, of which is only currently one book, but second one's coming up. I do a bunch of different ones. There's Strathmore. Now I'll feel bad about any of the authors who I don't mention. And you mentioned Haylock,
yes,
who I'm doing a book of theirs right now. I mean, not right now because I'm recording this podcast with you. But once I finish this podcast, I will go straight into Heretical Fishing,
nice.
Which I'm recording. I do a fair amount of lit RPG and other stuff. As we discussed perhaps before the show, I'm not sure how you're editing this. I have
what's that editing?
Couple of pseudonyms, and I do romance as well, and business and like nonfiction sometimes, and I'll pretty much try anything I haven't done before. I'm usually down to say yes to, if I can fit it into a schedule, which increasingly is difficult. But especially when lit RPG books like to be, 25 hours. So no, I usually like try anything once. And I do like short form kind of nonfiction as well, like articles and things. People often ask about like animation and gaming, which I do not do. I would like to. It's not a thing I've ever really pursued in any capacity.
Just open my Rolodex and call Larian Studios. I got
please do.
Awesome. So, and I feel as though many people don't know this, but you do record most of your stuff live in front of an audience on Discord, right?
That's only been recently that I've been streaming quite a lot. I would say only the last 6 months, maybe. I've had a Discord for the longer, but I've really only been kind of sort of streaming on Discord and TikTok now as well. TikTok Live the last like 6 months or so. It depends on the title because obviously you need the author and the publisher's permission to stream. So, for example, I did a book. There's a series called The Up and Under by A. Deborah Baker. That's a pseudonym of Shauna Maguire, who's quite a well-known fantasy sci-fi author. And I asked to stream that, and because that's Macmillan, kind of traditional publisher, it was a series of many emails. After which I had permission to stream one particular like 5-minute segment on one particular time, like one particular day. To their credit, they let me do that. So whereas like Podium, who I do the Monsters and other books for, and Athen and other publishers, they're enthusiastic because they just think, well, great, like more people are interested. They're going to maybe come across this on TikTok or Discord, and they're going to say, hey, what's this? I'm going to buy this thing. And so, it's as far as they're concerned, it's just publicity and a good thing. But kind of traditional publishing is traditional publishing, and they're very risk averse. That's how they're kind of trained to be. So they tend to not want to let you do that. But when I can, I try and stream stuff on my Discord, and I also stream Spicy Books across on another Discord, like that was set up called, I'm going to say it's called The Haven, yes, which someone invited me to some years ago. So I stream over there as well. So yeah, and I really enjoy it. Like my Discord people, in case any of my Discord people watch this, they're the best. Like they're just genuinely like it's such a pleasure sometimes when as I am drinking, this early in the morning, I can already say things like "It's a lonely job," but it can be. And
you and Shortloon, man, both the same.
yeah. Shortloon's off in his house in
I'm
Tasmania.
so lonely. Is it an
himself,
Australian thing?
with a gigantic collection of board games and
Oh my
no
God,
one to
yeah.
them. them.
So-
No, he does have people, but yeah, it does get lonely. And so
Yeah.
genuinely, when I like jump onto the Discord, and they are few in number, but tremendous in wit and intellect and kindness, and they're just a great bunch. So I very much enjoy that. TikTok is more like a fire hose of like who happens to be, swiping at any given time. So suddenly there's like 125 people, looking at me saying, what did I accidentally stumble across? Oh, it's just some guy reading, and then they move on to something else. But so it's a little more random, but it's also kind of fun because then you have people who occasionally like are swiping and have come across it because the algorithm has has been successful, and they're like, oh my God, I've listened to a book that you've narrated, and they get very excited. And then they usually ask me how to get into voice acting, which is probably your next question.
I mean, you can see the questions. I posted them, but
You sent them to me, didn't you? Or did you email me?
yeah, I posted them in chat.
I don't have them anymore in front of me.
Whatever.
I do recall. I thought there was some question of that.
Tips for aspiring voice actors.
See, there you go.
We'll get to that.
Which is a good question. We'll get to that. I'm spoilering the questions.
No, it's
Sorry.
it's fine. It's okay. No, it's okay.
People on the
Like,
Discord
first-
actually and TikTok are often like, "Are there spoilers?" They ask that all the time. To which I respond, "Am I swearing on this podcast? And what's your explicit language?"
I don't fucking care.
You don't care? All right, good. To which I'm usually like, yeah, it's all fucking spoilers. I'm reading the book. Like, I'm going to start spoilering the moment I open my mouth and continue to spoiler for the entire time that you're listening to this stream.
Awesome. Yeah. No, there was one thing earlier. You were talking about big publishers and how it was like this series of emails. Like, you're laughing because it's so Kafkaesque. I'm laughing because I know how it looks like inside of these organizations, and it's just everyone covering their butts.
Yeah. I mean, the risk-averse thing is like, I understand it. Like, completely get it. And I don't actually stream. I've never had any issues with any content that I've streamed showing up anywhere. So I've been fortunate in that regard. But I mean, I never stream all of anything ever, because I'm like, well, I don't want all of it to be like out in the world. I'm going to reduce the light purely not for your picture, but just because it's early and it's too bright. Like, I don't stream at all because I kind of don't want all of it out there. And I also like, it's my phone on TikTok. It's Discord. I use I have like a noise canceling thing going on, so it's not very good quality. I don't think someone's going to take the time to edit out every time I swear at my stomach to shut up so I can keep recording. Or anything like that. So that's kind of hasn't been an issue. But those of us who do stream, like Andrea Parsoneau and Travis and Baldry and I mean, there's lots of audiobook narrators who stream, and oddly enough, most of them who do work in like fantasy and romance, because that often means they're working with either independent with the authors directly. Or they're working for Podium or Athen or other companies who are happy to have it streamed. Whereas my colleagues who are principally working for Simon & Schuster and Macmillan and Harper and everything, it's, like I said, it's just too challenging to try and get that permission. So they don't really have that. They don't have that luxury of being able to stream. There was somewhere I was heading towards with the streaming and the colleagues and the.
I got a question if you.
Yeah. If I stop talking, it was. But yeah, I also shout out to those narrators, because that's kind of the reason. Like, I saw that they had Discords and they seem to have good people on them, and so I thought, I'm going to do that myself, but poorly. I still don't really understand how Discord works, but that's okay.
Yeah, me neither. Like, I press buttons and I'm hoping for the best. I was thinking about writing on Discord, but I mean, obviously my Discord isn't as big as yours. I was thinking, actually, just as a thought experiment. Imagine that in the future, because everything gets so much easier and cheaper and everything, and you can do VFX now with like a few clicks of a button, right? So imagine that we're having a way cheaper or way easier to make movies, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So imagine that you can do like a almost Netflix kind of a production with a crew of like 4 people and the actors. And it could be kind of cool at some point if that actually ever happens. If people were live streaming how that actually goes about, it would be kind of boring sometimes because like I worked at movies and it's kind of waiting a lot.
Oh yeah.
But it kind of could be kind of cool. Thinking about that. But now for the next question, because you were kind of like poking on it. Do you have any tips for aspiring voice actors / actors?
I mean, I will say, when I was a stage actor and a and sometimes screen actor in Australia, so people would do like Q&As after shows, theatre shows, or some sort of press thing, and people would ask, and I always felt like people would say like well, I'm going to be an actor, and so what should I do? And it always felt like not obvious because they're asking because they want to know, but in terms of like tips or advice, it was always like, well, you know what to do, like be in plays, like be in films, try and get an agent, like try and go to drama school if that's something you're into, and then audition forever, and kind of like that's the way forward. I will say that sometimes I would be on tour around Australia and people would ask that question, and they'd be in a very, very small town in somewhere in regional Australia, and I always felt a little I never wanted to say move because that seemed unfair, but it was really the kind of brutal reality of it. That is to say, one of the things that I do think is increasingly good about voice acting, and certainly audiobook narration, is that no longer do you need to be in LA or New York or London or somewhere like that where actors tend to congregate because that's where the work and the agents and everything is. Like over the past pre-COVID, and certainly even more so afterwards, you can be like a full-time professional voice actor in an island off the coast of Maine, like me, or like on a mountain in Virginia, like my colleague and friend Natalie Nordis, or you can be somewhere else geographically, and also you don't necessarily. I mean, if you look at like obviously we've got a phrase for it now with nepo babies and things like that, but so many actors are like third generation entertainment industry, and voice acting is still, I think, something where, and particularly for audiobook narration specifically, I shouldn't really talk about other voice acting in that I don't do a lot of, I can't do commercial acting or gaming or animation, though I have some colleagues and knowledge of it as well. And ironically, I used to do that in Australia, when I had an agent and things. Of course, this is back in the before times, so it was all me going into a studio and,
before the unpleasantness,
and doing that in a studio. But that is to say, like, I don't think there is, especially with audiobooks, I hate to use the word, but there isn't that kind of gatekeeping in that if you can do the job, like you can do the job. So people have come to it from acting backgrounds where they're like classically trained, like I was, and they went to drama school and they've been acting forever, or they may have come from software development, or they've come from recording commercials for a car yard in one notable instance, or just a love of books and the determination and tenacity and ability, and have made it have made it a career, which is an achievement in and of itself. If you can do anything and pay your rent and keep the lights on, I think you're doing a good job. So I don't know if this is tips and tricks. It's more encouragement, as if to say it does not matter where you are or what background you are coming from. If you are passionate about being a voice actor and you're prepared to work at it, I think there is a pathway for you, which can be all kind of like laws of attraction, positive thinking aside. There's a pathway for everything, sure, but it may be a little trickier to navigate. Whereas I do think for audiobooks and for voice acting, like in 2023, you can do it. The best advice is to read books and listen to books and get training or coaching in acting, or if you need that, or get training and coaching in the I mean, as well in the specifics of kind of now, if you're your own engineer, like I am, like we all are, you sort of need to have the knowledge, some passing knowledge of that as well, at least enough to, to make good audio that you can send. So, just train, read, and go forth and conquer before the robots take over.
Yeah,
I'll end on a slightly less encouraging note.
That's exactly the point I was going to, actually, because for those who don't know it yet, Amazon has recently revealed that like in your entire book, if you're putting on a Kindle Unlimited, basically, you can get it automatically read by one of Amazon's AI, and they will put it on Audible.
Yeah.
Or some sort of like Audible Unlimited, or they're calling it Audible Plus. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
I would like to hear your opinion about that, because I saw your Twitter thread.
Oh, I mean, it's devastating for myself and my colleagues. Essentially, it's not unexpected though. Like for a long time, people would say, "Oh, but basically because Audible represents such a significant slice of the market. They do in terms of like audiobook sales, certainly domestically in North America, but globally, Audible is such a dominant market force in terms of retail. The fact that they didn't allow AI or synthetic voicing in anything for sale on their platform is kind of the one thing holding it back. So like Google Books released that that kind of setup some time ago. Apple quite famously paid some very high profile narrators to sell themselves to
cross the picket line?
create voices. Well, it was before the union said not to. So they didn't technically do anything wrong, but yeah. So
for those who are only listening to this, you should have seen Heath's very, very acidic grin.
I have opinions on most things, but
that is okay. We're here to hear those. If you are a friend of the Kazoo ad, you have to be very, very strong now. I regret to inform you that Shirlaloon went and bought the tier that removes the Kazoo ad from all podcasts. And now it's just gone. So you got Shirlaloon to thank for that. On the other hand, if you want to add the Kazoo ad again, there's a tier for that too. Thanks so much for listening, and let's get on with the show.
But yeah, so basically, like, what was, if to really get into kind of the weeds for it, what was the one thing that was kind of holding it back was the fact that Audible and Amazon wouldn't have synthetic voices, and so it didn't matter if Apple Books or if Google Books or if bespoke kind of Deep Zen, and if you Google me and AI, you'll find various online what's the diplomatic interactions between me and various spokespeople for synthetic voices. Even there's like a Wired article from a few years ago that somehow I ended up in as well about AI voices as well. Again, just usually because I've said something on the platform formerly known as Twitter or Facebook or something, and someone has glommed onto it, and so suddenly people are asking me as though just to kind of get a narrator's point of view on it. But yeah, so basically, like, that was the one thing that we had preventing the floodgates from opening, and now that is no longer the case. It's not surprising to me and others. Some of my colleagues would be like, "Well, it's okay because Amazon and Audible," and it was always a question of when, because at the end of the day, they're in the business of making money. That's what they want to do. So if Amazon, I always presumed it was because Amazon were waiting until they were allowing their synthetic voiced material onto their platform rather than someone else's, which has now happened through Kindle Direct. And once that happens, then you kind of open the floodgates for, okay, now we can have other synthetically voiced books on Audible. So yeah, I mean the shorter answer after my very long answer is that it's not great for the industry. all we can do, or I feel like all we can do, is continue to do our jobs and try and do them to the best of our ability, and hope that people make choices with their purchasing that allow us to continue to feed our children and have a career.
Yeah. So I have so many opinions about this whole complex because, well, I work in IT, right? I've never worked in an AI company. It's only a matter of time until we create a narrative engine that actually produces good content for writers. And so I think at least 50% of the LitRPG market will just collapse. Because, with including myself, many of these books are not very well written. And right now, they only really fly because there's a huge demand for them, and they're more-ish.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So Stephen King isn't writing LitRPG.
Sure.
And yes, of course, like people like Shortloon, for example, or Zogarth or First to Fire, they don't need to worry because they've got the fan base, right? But here's my issue with the entire AI thing. The barrier of entry is being raised to professional level, right? Whereas before, you could just write a little bit of something and then earn $100 on Patreon for your writing. Like, oh, cool, this is nice. You can't do that in the future anymore if these engines exist.
Yeah, no, it's very true and very bleak. I mean, I was obviously talking about the kind of voice issue for it, but no, absolutely for writing. I think, a few years ago I would have said writing's further to go, but I guess I didn't anticipate both the speed with which things are developed and the ability for people to accept good enough, almost, in some capacity.
And that's the other issue, right? So I don't want to stump on anyone's toes, but I mean, if you're comparing, I'm not a fan, like Frank Sinatra fan, but just pop songs from the 50s. They had a beginning, they had a middle, they had an end, they had a little bit of a narrative thing going on, and then you compare that to mumble rap, right? It's one consistent beat the entire time, broken up with something that doesn't really quite make sense. And it's all about the emotion. It's very postmodern. It's okay, right? It gives people emotions, and it's nice. Same as Marvel movies. It's always kind of like the same thing, which is what people are getting bored of it, which is nice, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But I do feel as though that what you just said, right? Good enough is, good enough for most people. And we're kind of, I'm not going to say dumbing down everyone, but because it is going to be so hard to actually break into the market and do something that is extraordinary. I personally believe that good audiobook narration like yours, like Andrea's, like Travis's, will always be valuable because people start going to the theater, right?
Yeah, exactly, and that's a really good point to make. It's always that's it, theater is dead. They've been saying theater is dead for as long as there's been theater. And so no, that is true. People still go because it's a human in the same space as you, breathing the same air as you, and telling a story, and there is something deeply human and connective about that. It's interesting because I would say that a lot of the LitRPG audience, a lot of them are very are younger and tech focused, and so some of them, obviously I'm making generalizations, but don't kind of see any issue with AI. They're just, oh well, good, if there's more of it and it's cheaper, then everybody wins, which is obviously they're entitled to their take on it, but that's not how I feel, and how a lot of other people will feel as well. Even the argument, people will say, okay, well, an AI narrated synthetic voice, whatever you want to call it, isn't going to come up with the range of character voices and accents and inflections and things. That is true. And so I do think, for example, dry nonfiction is probably easier to listen to a synthetic voice narrate, your textbook than like an epic fantasy. But I also think that beyond that point, even if, because then they say, oh, well, but you can tweak dials and you can have a director who's there pressing like, load in this character voice and load in that character voice. But see, then you're ending up with someone sitting at a computer making cut and paste acting choices. So is that better anyway? But what I was getting to is that I still think, even with that, even if you have an AI that is that sophisticated and you have someone directing it, it's still not a person. There's no human connection. Someone isn't reading this material, engaging with it, imagining things, thinking thoughts, having feelings, and talking into a microphone. And if you're listening to it at like 2 times speed while you're like driving a truck, and maybe that's going to be okay, like you don't mind that no disrespect to whatever speed people want to listen to, like maybe that's not going to bother you. But for me, I want a person. I want a human. Yeah. Like that's what I want.
2 tricks. First, if you speak as fast as me, people can listen to it on second speed. Second of all, so here's the thing. You build yourself a LoRa. So it's an AI term, right? So a learning algorithm. And then you set that to automatically detect which character is speaking and then have that as selection. It's super easy. You can already do that. Right? It's just that no one has bothered to do it yet.
Sure.
So, and here's the point. I always make this point, and I think it's been a talking point that I've used for like the last month or so, but still very important. It is a very, very different thing if you are a carpenter and you're hand carving a chair versus you being someone who operates a CNC lathe, right? So a CNC lathe is something that cuts something out of a solid block of stuff.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, you're practicing a craft. On the second one, you are programming a computer to imitate a craft. And here's the last part.
Yeah.
I don't assume you've read Walter Benjamin. Frankfurt School of Philosophy, 1950s. And he wrote this very, very interesting paper that is very pretentiously titled, as papers are, the nature of the artificial object in the age of mechanical reproduction, or something like that.
Great title.
Absolutely, very catchy. And he basically argues that by making something mechanically reproducible, it loses its aura. And he doesn't specify what an aura is, but we all know that. You go to an IKEA and you're like,
absolutely.
Yes, this is an IKEA thing. And people spend time designing this, but it's different from, I don't know, like building your own shelf.
Well, it's funny that you said, you've gone for like a construction or a furniture analogy because my comfort viewing is Antiques Roadshow UK. That's the thing that, like, while I'm scoffing meals between long recording sessions, I watch like 10, 15 minutes of Antiques Roadshow UK. And because the stakes are only, is this thing worth a lot of money? It's not life or death, like some reality, kind of TV, or really people are going to be horribly upset. You get to learn interesting things about, some object that you would look at and think, what the hell is this? And then they're going to tell you what this object was. So the kind of history side of it, I love it. And also I love the characters in terms of both the experts and the people bringing things in. So you bring up that exactly, like, you look at these objects and as you say, there is a vast difference between the intent and the thought and the skill, and the imperfections that went into crafting something and something that is assembled by machine.
To kind of close the loop, they're telling a story.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And so I do think, the kind of, oh well, that's it, shut up shop, it's over, we're done, is not the case. But to probably move away from the AI conversation, which we could have endlessly, it is certainly discouraging, and we just have to, like, I think as so many things, do the best work we can. I do hope that they are very clear in labeling as well. That's something that if you Google me and find the Wired article, the reason why that article kind of came to be was because myself and some colleagues found AI narrated books that were for sale on Audible, and they just hadn't, Audible Amazon hadn't flagged it. And even when we told them this is AI, they notably emailed back and said, no, it's not.
Some intern,
Because
I bet you, some intern.
They listened to it and it didn't go like, I am reading a book. And so they were like, oh, it's a person. They're breathing. It has to be a person. No.
Ah, damn it.
The breath's included.
Oh my god. Yeah. So,
but
it's interesting. It's harsh.
Yeah, but it's not unique to voice actors as well. Obviously, with the SAG with the striking at the moment as well. There's studios want to be able to animate people like puppets after they're gone.
Are you a member?
So it's I am. Yeah. So, but audiobooks are not
no stricken. No.
that agreement. So we're not on strike either for work or promotion. But solid.
Last I heard, they are actually moving towards closing a deal. I heard a tremendous one. I guess I'm European, so for me, unions are just a way of life. But
yes, exactly. But my point is that it's not just it's not just voice actors, it's not just actors, it's not just it's across the board. I saw a good cartoon. Telling a cartoon is always fraught, but I saw a good cartoon where it was like we get the robots to do the jobs we don't want to do, but they're actually doing the things that like they're doing the things we want to do. And
I'm always saying, like, I mean, our huge part of our audience are truck drivers.
Which
is really ironic, because I would have thought truck drivers were to go before before audiobook narrators.
Sure, yeah,
right,
yeah, because the self-driving. That's what I mean. It's not unique to acting. It's a societal, cultural thing that we will be increasingly facing as we head into what is hopefully not too terrible a dystopia.
Absolutely. So I'm doing the IT manager job. The last thing I want to ask, just to like put a little of gasoline on this issue, is just think about where all that money goes. Anyway, let's go.
I mean that's true, and it doesn't get cheaper for people. Like, oh, would it be cheaper? It's not going to be cheaper.
No.
Like that's not how things work. Like audiobooks are already like a credit, or whatever else. Like it's not going to be cheaper for the person buying.
If you're buying it at $9, it's worth $9. I'm not giving it to you cheaper.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it's not going to be cheaper. It just means that instead of the money going to actors and editors and proofers, it's just going to go straight to Amazon.
Some tech bros. So, I'm as a tech bro. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a very, very
well, and not even tech bros. Straight to whoever's hoarding the wealth up the chain. Really.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to vast societal revolution. Exactly. You're listening to the Guillotine podcast, and
so Jason Asano. Yeah, he's.
But yeah. So did I give any tips and tricks?
Yes, you did.
I don't know if I did. I think I said that it's doable and train. That's really the best I can do. If you're looking for something specific, I always say that there's a great website called the Narrator's Roadmap, run by a woman named Karen Commons. If you Google Narrator's Roadmap, it will come up. And she's just assembled a lot of links and a lot of materials, like to kind of, start to put a foot in the right direction for that. There you are. I'm trying to be actually helpful.
I think you're doing pretty well. That's fine.
I often just give the glib answer, like on TikTok. People will be like, "What would you say to someone looking to get into audiobook narration?" And I'll just say, "Don't. It's full."
Yeah. Same thing when people ask, like,
I'll be like, "Just gatekeeper. No, we're good. We got everyone we need. We're fine."
So, what's the best part about being a Scrum Master / Agile coach? And I would say, like, well, after you've cried a lot, you can sleep way better. So. But yeah, man. Same thing as being an author. It's a breadless art, as we say in German. Brotlose Kunst.
Oh, yeah, like that. Oh, I like that phrase.
Because you're gluten intolerant.
No, I dig gluten. I like gluten.
Yeah. Oh, also, like, while we're at the point of stupid puns, you said you live on an island off of Maine.
Yes.
Is it Rhodes Island?
No.
Damn it.
But that would be good because we already made road jokes. Although Do the listeners know, or the viewers know about the road jokes, or is that not going to make it into the final edit?
If they don't know, they can listen to it in the bonus material that I have on Patreon.
Oh, I see. Good plug. Very smooth.
I'm getting better at those.
Very smooth.
Because I'm not a tech bro, so I need your money.
I too have a Patreon.
Oh,
so, as you brought it up, you can always go to mine.
So actually, that's interesting to me, and I don't mean this negatively. So, what's on your Patreon? What can people get on your Patreon?
Right. So what's on my Patreon is I do every month. I kind of do like it's called the audio. Do I know the name of my own Patreon? I think it's called Heath's Audio Content Fun Box is the name of my Discord. My Patreon is called something similar, and basically I do something every month. So I like, what have I done recently? Like I read a kid's book. I read Dr. Seuss's sleep book, like, on camera for people. I did karaoke with some of the He Who Fights with Monsters characters a few months back. So I did like I Will Survive, but it was Gary being like, at first I was afraid, I was petrified. So it's pretty ad hoc. I really just do things that amuse me and that I think will entertain my small but wonderful following. Like what else? The Dead Man series that I'm quite a fan of. I did. There's an American comedian, Jack Handy, who back in like the 90s had like a series of deep thoughts where he would say like little kind of philosophical comedy bits. I did like a series of those as the main character in Dead Man, who's kind of a gravel-voiced, steely-eyed Western. So it was all like, it's amazing to know there's an entire world that we can't even see. I'm speaking, of course, of the world of invisible, scary skeletons. Just like that kind of shit. So that's my Patreon. I also do concerts. They used to be monthly back in 2020 when, shit happened. I started doing something I call Cooped Up Cabaret, where I would just like, sing. And it was monthly, and then now it tends to be like 3 monthly, to be honest, because I'm busy working on other things. But I put up like the set lists, and I stream them over Twitch and like do things related to that. You can get like the archival recordings on Patreon. My Patreon is it's very much just that some people were very enthusiastic about wanting to be a member of my Patreon that didn't exist. And so I eventually succumbed and was like, all right, if you insist on giving me a small amount of money every month, I will do this. But yeah, so it's no like Shirtaloon, I'm going to buy a house. Yeah, Travis, I said it. But yeah, it's some money. So it's nice. It's again, community. Like it's not high paying, but I very much enjoy the people who are there and like putting out fun things. So yes, that's my plug. Yeah. Fun things on my Patreon.
Every month you're turning up the Heath.
Ah, nice. I'm surprised I haven't said that, honestly.
Feel free to steal it. I got many of these. I actually have brain damage, so I can't stop making them.
All right, so that was a good plug for both of us.
Absolutely. Let's go off script for once.
Because, well, the thing is, voice actors, we're paid, like session musicians. So, if a book that we record is a huge hit, that's fantastic. And it means, lots of people listening to it, which is great. And it also, perhaps means that we're more in demand because, we're doing something successful, but it doesn't translate to income, because that's just not how it works unless you've done like a kind of a profit share thing, like independently through which is a possibility, but
a risk
is risky. So, I mean, that's again, that's the other side to the coin. If the book sells, if the book makes millions, we get paid the money that we got paid for our session, to record it. And if the book doesn't sell a copy, we still got paid for the time it took to record it. So, again, there's that. Increasingly, when things are generating a lot of income, I do see, colleagues occasionally quietly lamenting that there isn't another model that involves residuals or royalties, because obviously if you're an actor in like a TV show or something like that that does very well, you're going to get a financial reward. Although obviously that, part of what they're striking over is it not being enough anyway, but at least it theoretically exists. Whereas audiobooks are still really kind of based on the, book on tape. Like it's only going to be a bestseller, and we're going to put it on cassettes and have it in libraries. And then now it's a $1 billion, it's a huge industry, generating a lot of revenue. And it's just kind of a quirk of how it was set up that actors don't get a percentage. So what I'm saying is that you should just directly give me money.
Heath, how can you be so greedy? Think about it. I mean,
exactly.
Like, if Audible doesn't take 75 to 60% of all the income of that audiobook, just for putting it on an FTP server with a crappy interface, what are they going to live from? Like, their huge, way too complex organization has to sustain itself somehow.
True.
Anyway, man, you bring out the worst in me, Heath.
Well, if we're talking about like AI and like not getting paid enough, immediately the conversation gets cynical and dark.
Okay, so I'm going to go on record on this. I do feel as though people of your caliber, Travis, Andrea, and so on and so forth, Tess, you kind of, I always thought that it would be kind of logical for you to at some point go like, hey, I believe in this book, and I actually do want a royalty share of this. I mean, I guess it's fair to say that many books are literally way more legible and enjoyable if they are performed as an audiobook. So it's a definite value add, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. I mean, people do. People buy books, follow the narrator, which is lovely, and that's true. It's just not how the industry is set up, and when things are set up in a different way, it's very nigh impossible to come into it and say, hey, how about if it was different? Because that's it's not a thing that anyone's going to.
That's what unions are for.
Play ball on, to use an American sporting metaphor.
To what? What? To what?
Oh, I said play ball.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is baseball, I believe.
Yeah,
I believe
exactly.
I think. I mean, I guess any of the ball sports, but I feel like play ball specifically is a baseball thing. I don't know. Everyone who knows about sports can tell me later.
Or isn't there also that thing about killing someone, like taking them out at the ball game? No, I'm just kidding. Of course, that's not.
Oh, yes.
Take me out at the ball game. No, wait.
Yeah. I sung that song in an audiobook, actually. Yeah, because there was a character who was a sentient gramophone named Scratch. Sentient gramophone named Scratch. And they could only say or sing what was, on their turntable. And so,
oh my God,
that was one of the things. That was, there you go, talk about risk averse. That was bizarre because the author wanted to use, like songs, and that copyright can be very problematic. So they purposefully only use things way out of copyright in both America and UK, because they have different markets have different copyright regulations. And even then, the publisher was like, "No, not this one. We don't think this one." Even though the author had done their due diligence absolutely and made sure everything they put in the book was out of copyright, there were still some songs that, I guess, like a cursory Google search, someone must have found a modern recording that was copyrighted and then got scared. So again, it's the risk averse thing. They were just like, no, you can't use that just in case. It's people often ask, like, why don't you sing in audiobooks? And that's the reason, because in general, publishers and producers don't want you to sing because they're terrified that you're going to do something that has legal ramifications.
We're going to have to cut this podcast short. I need to edit about 1,500 pages out of my book. I like this idea of introducing chapters, and I write new weird, so Lovecraftian, but like new stuff. And
I know.
Oh, you know it. Cool.
New weird.
Yeah.
Well,
You've been around. Okay.
I've been around.
So
China and I have danced at a party or two.
And so I kind of like introduce stuff.
That's my name dropping. That's my name dropping for the podcast.
Oh.
I was referring to China Miéville, who often people put as like the new weird. Well, I guess back in the day, maybe he's not so much in the popular consciousness anymore. Anyway, look him up. Great books.
Will do. China Miéville.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like to end my stuff, I insert stuff that I just find on the web because it's a sci-fi thing with like references, and many of the tarot references I use, I think, are actually copyrighted. So it's a good thing that I'm not selling this stuff yet.
Sure.
I might need to.
Yeah. That's a thing that you do kind of run into. Yeah, absolutely.
Also Wikipedia. But I think you can just write it at a back matter. Go like, hey, these things have been quoted from Wikipedia. Anyway.
Yeah. How do we get into? Oh, take me out. Ball game. Right. That's what it was.
Yes.
But yeah.
Exactly. So, damn it. I wanted to get off of record. All right. Yeah. Exactly. Not that we haven't done that before, but my question is kind of: so, what's something that you would love to read? Right. So, what's something that you're like, oh man, no one has approached me with this yet, or more of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd like to do some sci-fi because I love science fiction, and I've done some like Space Opera is a book that I recorded, and a little, but I would love to do like a science fiction kind of series. I mean, I like good writing as well, so in some ways the genre is less important. It's more, like it's great to do things where I think it's good writing, and I enjoy, one of the things I enjoy about nonfiction is you get to learn stuff. The short stuff, short form stuff I do for Apple and for others and stuff. You get to learn something that you didn't know, which is always good. But yeah, I'd love to do a science fiction series. Like I've done like, I think only one. I think I've only done one science fiction book, and that one's quite a specific one. So yeah, I would love to do that. Good question. That doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. Well, I mean, they're kind of the twin genres of
and they perform
Big G geekdom.
They perform so much worse than standard fantasy and cultivation, right? Shanja.
Yeah.
I have no idea why, because I personally think sci-fi is dope. You can do way more.
But by perform, you mean like Royal Road?
Oh yeah, exactly.
So yeah, of course, with the kind of
half the sales,
niches. Because in general, I would say like science fiction is a big seller. In a more broad sense.
Not in the LitRPG square.
Yeah, sure. No, that checks out.
Any idea why?
But yeah,
I always ask this, but any idea why?
No, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't been approached to do it. Oh no, that's not true. I have. But yeah, no, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. That's a good question. I mean, I think like sci-fi and fantasy too. It's that whole thing that it's it's kind of people act as though kind of culturally it's niche in some way, but of course, like 2023, it's impossible to say that. Then when you look at like Star Wars and Game of Thrones and the Marvel films and like so much of like what people thought of as their kind of like geek culture is AAA blockbuster bestsellers. Like you still look like Dune is still usually like in the Audible top 10 list.
We have
on a weekly basis.
We have one, Heath. The nerds have won.
So it's kind of like it's very popular, but then people, if I say like I narrate a lot of LitRPG to someone in a bar, you get the thing, the turning
a little wheel circle,
where they're no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah, I think maybe that's just it, right? Like we nerds always have to have something that gets us hung up in a locker by our underwear. So we were like, the jocks have taken Marvel from us, so now we're actually going to like do something with numbers.
Yeah. That's very true.
In a desperate last move, we injected numbers into our fantasy to make it even less appealing to the mass market.
Yeah, well, I do when I'm trying to, explain that RPG to someone, as it happens occasionally. I'm like, the stuff that might be in like a computer game or something that you wouldn't put in a book. You put that in the book,
and so it's a game. So it's like is it like D&D? Kind.
I mean, well, it is. I mean, the thing is, like, you haven't asked, but I'm going to pretend you did. Like, my introduction to LitRPG was an email from Podium Audio saying, "Will you narrate this LitRPG?"
And you were like,
so I had not encountered it before. There was said, there's this book series, and well, it's probably going to be 3 books, is what they actually said at the time. I know that because I recently was reading that email because I had to, for other reasons, I was like looking at that thread. You get the email threads that stretch over many, many years. And I was looking at that and I was like, there were like 3 books, maybe.
And which one was that?
That was He Who Fights With Monsters.
Oh, yeah, of course. That short little series. Yeah. Of
yes,
novellas.
The little one, yeah. But so that was my first introduction to LitRPG, was Podium saying, "Will you narrate this LitRPG?" At which point I had to Google, what is LitRPG? But the thing is, as soon as I started reading it, both monsters and other things, it felt immediately familiar. Yeah. Like I started reading it and I was like, oh, of course. Yeah. Like this, I get this. Like, again, the reason why I bring that up is because I was like, yeah, right. Dungeons and Dragons, all the other books I've read, like I've always been a gamer since I was a tiny child and still am now. And so it completely was immediately familiar to me. And I was like, oh, this is great. Love it. So I was an easy convert in that regard.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has like really written the next great American novel in LitRPG. But that's also not something that people want. I actually saw a thread on Facebook who was like, "This book is not the next great American novel," and thank God for that. It's just a good LitRPG. But some books, notably, of course, again, I am someone coming down from the heavens and presenting like a scroll that says all the skills, right? That's really good. But also the Warformed ones that have recently come out. So Fire and Song, that one came out recently. And you definitely read that and you're like, okay, he spent a lot of time on this book. Like definitely a lot of time. And I'm so glad it paid off because when I read my stuff, for example, I sometimes think like, oh, wow, the description here is really lacking. I use the same verbs the entire time. And actually that brings me to my next question, kind of. So what's challenging in LitRPG? What's different in reading, narrating those, or something like that? What's this? Another ad? Yeah, because I'm not Zogarth and I really need money. Joke aside, if you're enjoying this podcast, check out Patreon. Like, subscribe, you know the drill. Speaking of Patreon, by the way, there is at least half an hour of content for every hour of podcast you're listening to. For Raven's Dagger, for example, we have 2 hours of bonus content that you can enjoy. All right, I'll see you there, and enjoy the show.
What's different? I mean, as we've hit upon, I guess system text is something that you probably wouldn't encounter in other books, and certainly from an audio perspective, it's a unique challenge. I love metafictional stuff. So like I did a book called Radiance forever ago that had like a ship's manifest, so it was like pages of this much sugar and this much this and this much that. I love it. It's great. Like, but of course, visually you take that information in a different way than listening in an audiobook. So in a book you go, oh, awesome. And there's sort of world building info in there because it's not just things you're familiar with. It's other things that are, callow milk, that's kind of unique to that world. But you sort of take it in visually. You see it, you glean some information, and you move on. Whereas, the constraints of linear time and audio mean that in audio you're just hearing it. So like if you press, I think, I could be wrong, but like if you press sample on that book, I think it goes straight to me reading a list of in-universe films.
Oh, cool.
So whoever decided, like from the publisher or from Audible, can I say disrespect intended? Disrespect intended. Whoever decided to pick the part that's the sample, or maybe they didn't pick and they literally just went 4 minutes in, like, let's do it. It's just me going, My Love Gave Me Light, 1926, director Percival Unk. It came from the blue, Danube, director blah blah blah. 19. So it's just me reading a list of films, and that doesn't necessarily translate so well to audio. But we're in this era now where we want the full book. Like we're no longer, and I think this is a great thing. We're no longer in the abridged. Like if you talk to the boomers and older, they're still kind of like, oh, is it abridged? We're like, no, we don't truck with that shit no more. Like, in general, we want the whole book. Yeah. So I value that and I appreciate it. But yeah, you do end up with the situations where you're going. I was just recording book 11 of Monsters, and there's not a lot of system text in that. But wait, 11, 10, 10 numbers. And there's not a lot of system text in that book, actually, numbers. Yeah, pretty much. But there was one bit that was like, your this skill has gone to like gold 1. Your this skill has gone to gold 2. Your this skill has gone to gold 3.
Spoilers.
And that's the point. Well,
spoilers.
Sure. Yeah, it's spoilers. And so at this point, I'm like, I'm just counting. I mean, what I'm doing here is I'm counting. Yeah. Like this is just, this is me being like, I'm basically like 1, which is fine. But
you would be surprised how many people are down for the count. Hey.
Well, I do love the count if we're going to the Sesame Street reference. But yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question. I brought up one thing. What's different about them? I mean, that's one thing. Funnily enough, after I started doing LitRPG and I'd done a few books from a few series, I thought, you know what, I'm going to I'll sort of, you keep your eye out and ear open for people giving advice. One of the things I love about audiobook narration that I genuinely love, I've talked about it being lonely, but there's also the fact that like now, I don't have a director. An author might say, here's some ideas for, I heard this character with this voice, but they may not. Shirt would tell you, he never said a word. Travis was like, here's the book,
enjoy,
do your job. So, there was no discussion of what anyone sounded like. And a lot of authors do work that way. And so, you're making kind of a lot of decisions. And so that is to say, I remember reading someone, a colleague of mine, and they said, oh, okay, well, if you're doing LitRPG, one of the really important things is that the system text has to be read in the voice of the protagonist. Because you want to be reading that and reacting to it as the protagonist would be reading it. So if they're like excited or confused or impressed or elated or whatever, you're going to hear that in their voice reading the system text. And they kind of presented it as a rule or an absolute, which I thought was fascinating because I don't do that. And
very cool.
Many of my colleagues don't do that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's like you make choices. I have done it. There's one series where that's how the system text is because I thought it fit that series. But then like other series, there's a different kind of voice because I basically like thought about it and thought about the tone and just thought, yeah, this is kind of the voice I want to go for. And there's no one really like second guessing us, and we deliver like 25-hour books. Yeah. And at that point, it's a little late to have artistic thoughts about them because they're done.
Yeah. So I very memorably, I remember you reading out an entire recipe for lemonade in the system voice. I love that. That was great.
I love that. I said I love metafictional things. Anything like that. If you put a recipe or a letter or a ship's manifest or like a transcript of something, I love that shit. I adore it. I think it's great. So
I'm so sad I write.
So no, I think. What was that?
I'm so sad I write female MC. Otherwise, I would chuck you my book.
Oh no, it's good. We need more. Lots of different protagonists out there in the world.
Oh yeah,
to answer the question, like I do think that the skills for narrating a lit RPG book are the same as not the same, but it's basically like what you would bring to any fantasy or or fiction like that. There are specific system voice we talked about. I do think there's often a lot of characters, and I would personally. I think there's like what's the best way to put this? I feel like there's certain expectations with the lit RPG audience that, to me, is how I like to do books anyway. So, like, what I mean is that, like, I've still now read articles in the New York Times or like Variety, and they're talking about, you know, audiobook narrators that they enjoy and how their job is to get out of the way of the text and you know, like, it just kind of like they're not acting it, because that would be you know, gauche, or that would be over the top. They're just, you know, reading it and letting the author's kind of voice come through. Now, they're mostly talking about different kind of books, you know. They're talking about literary fiction, you know, and things like that. But that's very much their opinion. Now, that's fine. I'm not casting disparagements on the critics who feel that way, or indeed the voice actors or narrators who that's how they narrate. That is a skill set unto itself, and like, I can enjoy listening to books like that. But it's not what I think. It's not what I come to an audiobook for. Like, I want to hear a performance. Like, that's what I want, because it's an actor. So, like, sure, there are kind of like levels to how much, but I do think that, like, within lit RPG, and to some extent within epic fantasy or high fantasy or whatever you want to call it, in a broader context, audiences are prepared for a more dynamic, big, you know, for if you want to use that phrase, kind of performance, and like, I like that. That's, you know, that's kind of like what I want to do. So
I also think that, I mean, we touched upon it before, right? The transformative nature of it is really cool, because sometimes it really does make the book a lot better. Right? I do have some audiobooks that I couldn't listen to where I was like,
because you don't like the choices. Well, this is the thing. If you're making strong, big, bold choices, you know what? People are going to not like them. And also, you might have made really shitty ones. Like I said, no one's really, you know, second guessing us. So that's the case. But the way I see it is the same way as I always saw Shakespeare. I used to work for the Australian Shakespeare Company and the Melbourne Theatre Company, and I did a lot of Shakespeare when I was a stage actor in Australia. And directed Shakespeare as well. And I feel the same way about Shakespeare, which is, you know what? I can do a production of The Tempest where we are all Roombas. And
oh God, yeah, I can see it.
You might hate it. It might be a artistic, you know, travesty. Guess what? The play still exists.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't take The Tempest and erase it. It's still there.
You just
and the next director and the next group of actors is going to do a different thing. And I feel the same way about audiobooks. Me doing a book is me doing a book. It's Heath Miller reading this book. It's me performing that book, if you want to use that terminology. I like that Podium put performed by, and some publishers put read by, and some put like narrated by. It's like interesting to see what the performance. It's me reading the book. That book still exists.
Yes, exactly.
So don't worry. Like, you can go to Kindle and read that book, and the version where I didn't make those acting choices is still there. And so that's okay. And if you want to get the screen reader to read it to you, you're welcome to do that as well. Like, so I kind of feel that there's a freedom to me in that. Now, is there going to be another version of He Who Fights with Monsters with a different narrator in 10 years? I mean, probably not, but, like, you know, who knows? Like, it does happen. Look at the Pratchett audiobooks that I adore that Nigel Planer did, and then they've recently kind of redone those and removed all the Planer books from Audible, and, you know, now there's another version. So, like,
the removal,
you know, it does happen.
The removal is what irritates me.
I hate the removal. Just have both. Just have both.
But not
yeah, no, I feel the same way.
Exactly.
But
I mean, He Who Fights with Monsters, read by Wayne June. Yeah, I would do that.
But sorry, you were asking a question. But I was.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I was wondering if I think for you it's always this has been an Audible. This has been a Podium production read by so and so forth. Do they write that out for you, or do you just like make it up?
Yeah. Podium call that, and a lot of publishers call that billboards. So there you go. That's the. I'm always hesitant to say industry term, because the fact is that different publishers use different terminology, and it can be different in the UK and you know, the US and Australia. And but yeah, for Podium it's billboards. Yeah, and it has, man, that I've read that enough times now that I'm like, we'd love to connect. Like, exactly. You can find our fans and trolls on social media.
The trolls one always gets me.
It's, that's right. Yeah. So no, they do, and they update it. Like, I noticed that the one I read recently was like X. instead of Twitter. So
which kind of hurts. But
yeah, it hurt a little bit. But yeah, so they update those. All rights reserved. I do enjoy saying that. I have a TikTok as well, where I occasionally do things, and I did a video once where I was like, how much emotion and how many different reads can we give some banal like bit that you always have to say, like all rights reserved, or chapter one.
God, yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, if you're asking about that, it's good fun. I love reading credits because I do it at the end. So to me, it's like a I'm like,
you do sound super relieved now that you mention it.
Oh yeah. That's not true. I sometimes do. Sometimes midway through, I do the credits. It's occasionally I'm like,
it's a treat.
I start some day and I think to myself, you know what? Like we're getting there. I'm gonna do the credits today. I'm feeling it. But usually I leave it to the end and then bring it in.
No, actually, I do mean that. Like sometimes you do actually feel like it's a cool end for the book, right? Because you as a listener also like there's some sort of transference going on.
Yeah, plus your familiarity of hearing it. This is Audible. When you hear it again, you go, and this makes me feel good.
And then this really weird Audible like gramophone recording that it did. I have no idea. Audible hopes it was a program. Right?
Yeah. It was like one of the guys before Audible was Amazon. That was the guy who did
German
company,
by the way.
And he did the voice. He did the voice for it. So yeah, you still hear that.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a weird gig. Audiobooks, because I was talking about Shakespeare. Like to other actors when they've been asking about in 2020, suddenly my colleagues with successful film and television and theater careers were suddenly messaging me through Facebook and other things and being like, "Hey, Heath, you do audiobooks, right? You do voice acting, right? Like in your house? How does that work?" And I was nice about it.
Yeah.
And then when restrictions lifted, they were like back to their TV show and
yeah. But I mean, that's
back to their Sydney Theatre Company gig, and we're like, "Phew! Thank God I didn't have to do that."
oh man, so many rude comments I gotta think about like right now. Like,
yeah. Well, it's like it's that thing where it's great that you meet people like, and they'll say, if you get into the conversation, the "what do you do" conversation, which I never initiate that conversation ever, and never have, because I guess I've been an actor. I've been a professional actor since I was 11, and it's the only job I've ever really had other than, I've sold tickets in box offices and, ushered in theaters and cleaned out shipping containers and done, like whatever I had to do to, make money. But in terms of like career, vocational job, acting is all I've ever done. So I've never much enjoyed getting into the like, what do you do conversation for that reason. But
you're an actor.
If you do... Yeah, you're an actor. What have you done that I know? Nothing.
Do you know LitRPG? What? And then
even back when I was a stage actor, they'd be like, "Have you been in anything I've seen?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know every stage play you've been to see. Have you been to see any stage plays?" "No." "Well, then probably not." "Oh no, I saw Les Miserables 4 years ago. I wasn't in that." All right, good.
Cool, awesome. Thanks for the talk.
But when you're telling people, I do like it when they say, you say, "Oh, audiobooks," and they're like, "Oh, you're writing the book." I say, "No, I'm narrating and I'm reading it into a microphone." And they'll say, like, so it's a bit like acting. I always like that question. So often people say it's a bit like acting, to which I usually respond, "I like to think it's a lot like acting." Yeah.
Oh, that's so wholesome. Oh, cool. Nice.
So it's like, yeah, it is. It's some even say voice acting.
Oh. I want to grill you more about your job of cleaning out shipping containers in the bonus material. Definitely do. But we need to talk about one book you love and why it is awesome, because we have probably reached the end of the show.
Oh, we're out of time. Wow, time does fly.
Well, I gotta record more bonus material for people, and I've got a interview with Red Bruno in about an hour. So.
Oh, fair enough. Hi, Rat. what one book I love and why?
Yes.
A book I have recorded, or just a book in general?
I'm a coach. I ask powerful questions that are very open.
Sure, and I can interpret it however I like?
Yes.
Sure.
Giving you all the emotional work.
Yeah. No, that's entirely reasonable. See, now I feel like I'm like, have I ever read a book?
Is it about Incas?
Book I love. What's the last one? I'm sort of. I read so often, like for work and things that maybe colleagues of mine who are writing stuff, editing, that like I'm like, what was the last thing that I read for pleasure and really enjoyed, that I can recommend, or like a favorite book. I don't know. I also feel like I often have different. So one of my favorite books is Little Big. I don't know if you're familiar with this book by John Crowley. That's an amazing book that I adore. That's like one of my favorite books, kind of classics. And I often, when people say, what's a book you'd recommend, I give that one. And I feel like it's probably not what people are after. They're like, no, I mean like a LitRPG book or something like that. But it's quite sweeping and baroque, but it's an incredible book, and like it does things with really subtle folklore and atmosphere. So I would recommend that book. Is an amazing book, and I love it. It's so rich, and there's so much. I've reread it probably 3 or 4 times, and every time I go back, there's like something else I find in it that I think is amazing.
Cool.
Little Big. That's my book.
Awesome.
To answer your question,
it's a very good answer. I like it. That brings us to shoutouts. So any shoutouts you wanna do? Anything that you want to shout out?
Does that include plugging things? I've already plugged Patreon if that ends in. So if you want to hear more of me, obviously you can buy books that I narrate very easily by looking up my name in Audible. But also I have a Patreon you can join. I'm on Discord. If you type in my name in Linktree, you'll find other places I'm around. Definitely. If you do like LitRPG and you haven't checked out the Dead Man Walking book, I would plug that, because it's quite different to some of the other ones in that it's like a Western post-apocalyptic thing. But I really enjoy that book. It's very dark, I will say, and kind of the gore you would expect in a sort of Fallout-esque setting. But I really enjoy it, and more people should listen to it. Again, I'm not going to get paid more, but I just want more people to hear it because I think it's great.
I saw that. It sounds pretty cool. All right. And so we're going to cut the main part of the podcast here. So thank you very much for listening. And I hope you've enjoyed.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
If you're listening to this on YouTube, like, subscribe, you know the drill. Everything helps. Please help me, please. And do consider subscribing to Patreon, because Heath and I were going to be talking a bit more about cleaning out shipping containers. We're going to be talking about which voices he likes the most, or which are his favorites. And I also feel as though we should be, I kind of want to talk to you about heretical fishing and kind of ask you like how far you're into that, and so on and so forth. All right. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.